In the exact moment when the music stopped for a beat and everyone raised their glasses, my husband grabbed my wrist with enough force to knock the air out of me and whispered in my ear with icy contempt, "You shouldn't be here." And in that millisecond, I finally understood that the problem had never been me. It was the place they wanted me to stay in. I don't know if you've ever lived through a moment so cruel it felt like it was happening in slow motion, as if your whole life hit pause just so it could show you the truth. But that's how it was. The entire ballroom was glowing, those warm, golden lights in the mansion that Lorraine, my mother-in-law, loved to flaunt, as if the house were an extension of her own ego. But around me, everything went dark on the inside. I felt my skin prickle, not from the cold, but from the emotional shock burning deep inside, right in that place where we stash everything we've never told anyone. And even then, what hurt the most wasn't what he said. It was the way she looked at me. Lorraine was on the other side of the room, but somehow she felt way too close. Half-lidded eyes, that half smile that wasn't a smile at all. It was satisfaction, a bitter kind of happiness, the kind only small-minded people feel when they manage to shrink someone else. And that's when I realized that moment wasn't Desmond slipping up. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It wasn't wedding night nerves. It was planned. It was approved. It was rehearsed. And in a strange way, that didn't destroy me. It woke me up. I took a slow breath, trying not to shake. He let go of my wrist with the same quiet speed he'd grabbed it, as if no one could possibly notice. But I noticed. My entire body noticed. When I lifted my head, I saw something I'll never forget. That quick, dirty exchange of looks between him and Lorraine. It wasn't a, "Are you okay?" look. It was a, "You did exactly what we agreed on" look. And in that moment, I felt a chill that didn't come from my body, but from my soul. An old kind of dread, the kind we shove aside for years, telling ourselves, "I'm just overthinking it." But I wasn't. I never was. The truth is, that family had always watched me like you look at a piece that doesn't match the set. Something tolerated, never belonging. I took one step back, trying to look natural. But inside, I was rearranging everything. Every gesture, every silence, every memory. Every time Lorraine corrected me in front of other people with that fake polite tone. Every time Desmond made decisions for me so you won't stress. Every photo I never appeared in. Every invitation addressed only to him. Every conversation I joined that suddenly, mysteriously, changed subjects. Except that tonight, the performance was over. The head table was set with over-the-top perfection, silverware polished to a shine, crystal glasses lined up, place cards with names on every plate. I walked over there pretending I was just enjoying the party, but when I got close, I felt the first real stab of truth. There was no place card for me. There was one for everyone else. Even for some distant cousin, but not for me. And the chair? Slightly pulled back, like someone had removed it just before I arrived. A snub done so carefully it had to be discreet. Just not discreet enough for the eyes of a woman who's tired. My chest tightened, but my mind went cold, sharp. I felt that sensation you get when a truth too big finally cracks open inside you and you can't shove it back down anymore. And not fitting in that room didn't make me smaller. It made them smaller. Because there, in the middle of all that plastic elegance, I realized that what they called tradition was really just hereditary arrogance. I walked through the ballroom like I was walking through a memory, and that's when I noticed something else. Every guest looked away a split second before talking to me. Every gesture carried this tiny hesitation. Every smile felt rehearsed. I wasn't welcome. I was being watched. And, ironically, something inside me started to fall into place. I wasn't trying to please them anymore. For the first time, I was actually seeing. My breathing slowed, my body steadied. I wasn't just some lost woman at that party. I was a woman starting to understand where she was standing, and more importantly, why. But the moment that really turned that evening into a before and after happened when I walked toward the main staircase to get away from the crowd. That's when I noticed something so strange it felt almost symbolic. A crooked frame, slightly off, like someone had rushed to move it. And right when I reached out to straighten it, I felt a shiver. Not from fear, from revelation. Because in that exact instant, I realized it wasn't just that party that had been carefully staged to make me feel out of place. My entire life with them had been set up that way. And there, on that step, lit just a little too brightly for so many lies, a thought came into my mind. Clear, firm, impossible to ignore. There is something in this house they never wanted me to see. And when I finally pulled my hand back from the frame, leaving it crooked, I felt the full truth rise up under my skin. That night wasn't beginning. It was exposing. And I hadn't seen even half of it yet. That crooked frame on the staircase wasn't just out of place on the wall. It knocked me out of place inside my own story. As I stared at it, feeling that nameless discomfort rise in my chest, my mind began drifting back in time, like someone had hit a rewind button inside me. Because the truth is, that night in the mansion didn't come out of nowhere. It was the peak of a long road full of small signs I insisted on calling family quirks, different upbringing, or just my imagination. And if I'm being honest, I had to reach that brink of collapse moment to finally admit I wasn't imagining anything. I'd spent years being kind in a place that only responded with polite disdain. When I met Desmond, he wasn't this rigid man aligned with his mother's wishes. Or at least he didn't seem like it. I met him in a neutral space, far from the mansion, far from Lorraine's eyes, in a small coffee shop near my job. He laughed easily, listened closely, noticed details, the way I held the mug with both hands, the habit of tucking my hair behind my ear when I got nervous. He was tender in a way that makes a woman like me, someone carrying invisible scars, believe that maybe, finally, someone is seeing her fully. He would say things like, "You have no idea how good it feels to talk to someone who doesn't live in a world of appearances." Back then, I believed he wanted out of that world. Today, I understand he just wanted a breath outside of it, never the possibility of leaving it behind. The first time I stepped into Lorraine's mansion, I was still the girlfriend. I remember the feeling of walking into that enormous foyer, the gleaming floor, the old photos on the walls, the flower arrangements that looked like they belonged in a magazine. I arrived with a homemade cake, thinking that gesture said everything about who I was. Someone who brings, who contributes, who cares. Lorraine took the pan, looked at the frosting, and said with that slippery smile, "How authentic. You enjoy doing these things, don't you, Maya?" That day, I laughed and answered, "I do," as if I'd been complimented. Today, I know that comment was already putting me in a box. The woman who serves, the one who brings things, the one who tries. Never the one who is welcomed, understood, or celebrated. I walked in as a guest, and she immediately cast me as emotional staff. Over time, it became routine. Family gatherings were always planned between her and Desmond. I found out about the details later, like someone receiving a copy of a contract already signed. Sometimes he would come to me with that calm, rehearsed voice and say, "Baby, my mom prefers the dinner to be a little more formal. She already chose the menu, okay? She gets anxious if she doesn't have control." And I would say, "Sure, no problem," swallowing the sting in my chest. Because we are taught from a young age to make concessions for the sake of peace. I didn't want to be the difficult one, the one who gets in the way, the one who doesn't fit. So I yielded, and each concession took a small piece of my voice. Even so, not everything was cold. That's why it took me so long to see clearly. There were days when Desmond truly seemed different. On some Sundays, when it was just the two of us, he would cook with me in our small kitchen, ask about my mom, laugh at stories from my childhood. Sometimes he'd put his hand on my face and say, "I know my family can be intense, but they'll get used to you. Trust me." And I trusted him. That's how so many women stay, caught between the man who was sometimes sweet and the family that is almost always cruel. We cling to moments of tenderness like someone warming themselves with a lit match in the middle of winter. But even in the good moments, his world had an invisible border. Whenever his phone rang with his mother's name on the screen, I saw him shift. His tone dropped, became flat, almost childlike. He paced around the house while talking, as if reporting in. Sometimes I caught fragments. "No, Mom, she's different. I know. No, I'm not going to argue tonight." Then he'd hang up, take a deep breath, and come back to me, trying to smooth things over, saying none of it was my fault. But he never said that in front of her. Never. That night, as I watched the mansion buzzing with guests, everything began to take on a new color. The way Lorraine greeted me, air kiss, no eye contact, like she was greeting the wife of one of her son's employees, was already a warning. Other women got hugs, real compliments on their dresses, questions about their lives. With me, it was always neutral, always distant. "Glad you could make it, Maya." As if being there were an effort on my part, not a deliberate invitation from them. The photo moment was the first knife of the night. When someone called, "Let's take a family picture," I naturally started walking with them. I was a wife. I shared bills, a bed, a routine, plans with her son. But then came the sentence, said with the casualness of someone asking for more ice, "Let's take one of just the blood family first." Everyone moved so fast, it was clear they already expected that. I stopped mid-step, looked at Desmond, waiting for the smallest sign that he saw me. All it would have taken was a simple sentence, "Mom, Maya joins us." It didn't come. He just straightened his jacket, like he was preparing for an old portrait that had to look perfect. And he posed beside her, leaving a space exactly where I didn't fit. I stepped back, trying not to show it, leaned against a column, smiling at no one. The photographer said, "Smile." I just watched the scene like I'd been pushed out of my own marriage. They laughed, raised glasses, joked about one more for the living room wall. And me? I was the rest, the cropped out piece. Then, a half-drunk guest beside me muttered, without a filter, "She's never liked you, you know. That's old news." My heart raced. "Who?" I asked, even though I already knew. Lorraine. She always had another type in mind for Desmond, but he insisted. He laughed, shrugged, and wandered off, leaving that truth dumped into my lap like a spilled drink. I took a deep breath and did what I'd learned to do my whole life, pretending it didn't hurt that much. I walked slowly through the ballroom, adjusting my mask. And right then, something happened that I would later recognize as the first crack in the walls of that family. As I walked by, I heard a distant aunt whisper to another, not realizing I was behind them. "She tries so hard. Sometimes I feel bad for her. We could be a little kinder." The other answered, annoyed, "Don't say that. Lorraine hates it." The aunt who'd shown a sliver of empathy noticed me, flushed, and shot me a quick, apologetic look. She didn't say a word, but that micro gesture, an acknowledgement of injustice, was the first time in years someone in that family didn't play against me. It was tiny, but I felt it. And in that instant, I understood two things. First, not everyone there agreed with how they treated me. Second, their fear of upsetting Lorraine was stronger than any sense of fairness. I kept walking, trying to piece everything together, and my eyes drifted back to the gallery wall along the staircase. I had seen many of those photos before. They told the story of the family before me. Birthdays, Christmases, vacations, ceremonies, the before Maya. That had never bothered me. What started to bother me that night was the feeling that there was a during Maya that had been carefully erased. And while staring at that wall, feeling that discomfort climbing my throat, I felt something unlike anything I'd felt during dinners, lunches, or gatherings in that house. I no longer wanted to be accepted. I wanted to understand. And understanding, I already suspected, meant going exactly where they didn't want me to go, physically and emotionally. When I climbed 2 more steps and neared the crooked frame, I heard the distant sound of a glass clinking, someone calling for a toast to the Ellison family legacy. I stopped there, between the toast and the frame, between the official version of the story and the sense that pieces were missing. And right in that in-between space, between what they showed and what they hid, a sharp thought cut through my mind. If they're capable of cutting me out of a photo, what else are they capable of? And I had no idea that later that very night, I would start finding some answers. When I stood there in front of that crooked frame, I felt something that wasn't exactly fear. It was more like my whole body sensed, before I did, that this night wasn't going to be just another uncomfortable dinner in the mansion. It was as if I were finally about to see what had always been hidden behind the polite gestures, the carefully measured phrases, and the smiles that never reached anyone's eyes. I touched the frame lightly with my fingertips. I didn't move it. I didn't straighten it. I just touched it. And in that touch, I felt something literal and unmistakable. An absence, a gap, a missing piece. I knew there had been another photo there once. I knew because the dust outlined a slightly lighter rectangle. I knew because the glass had a smudge where a finger had pressed. I knew because I had never seen that frame hanging there before. Suddenly, that frame felt heavier than it looked. But it was too early to draw any conclusions. So I turned slowly and stepped down one stair, trying to blend back into the crowd. But the ballroom was different. Or maybe I was. The sounds felt distant. Conversations dropped to a hush when I walked by. Glances were too quick to be innocent. It was as if everyone in that house knew something. Everyone except me. And as painful as it was to admit, that feeling wasn't new. I just had never had the courage to name it. I walked toward the side hallway, one of the few spots with softer lighting, where no one stopped to chat. I needed to breathe. I needed to hear myself think, something that always seemed forbidden inside that house. It was there that I heard the first whisper that wasn't directly about me, but was absolutely about me. 2 women stood behind a giant flower arrangement. She looks out of place. Of course she does. Lorraine never wanted him marrying someone like that. My heart skipped. Like that? How? Like that? Who? Like that? Me? The second woman added, "And did you see how he grabbed her wrist at the entrance? He's exhausted. I don't know how he puts up with it." Puts up with what? My existence? My presence? I felt my face heat up. But instead of backing away because of the pain, I backed away because of strategy. I needed to listen. I needed to understand. I needed to gather the pieces I'd dropped for years, thinking they were insignificant. I kept walking, and up ahead, I spotted Clara, my sister-in-law, standing near the powder room, speaking quietly with a cousin. She was fidgeting with her phone, tapping rapidly as if sending urgent messages. When I passed by, she lifted her eyes just for a moment. And in that look, I didn't see contempt. I saw panic. It was the first time I realized they weren't just trying to exclude me. They were trying to control what I might see. And that changed everything inside me. As I walked back toward the main room, something unexpected happened. One of the aunts, the same one who had felt sympathy for me earlier, moved close to me in a discreet gesture, pretending to reach for a canapé. She spoke so quietly I almost missed it. "Don't take it personally, dear. She treats anyone who threatens her position this way." I looked at her surprised. "I'm not threatening anything," I said. She gave a sad little smile. "You don't have to. A woman who doesn't bow is threat enough." Before I could reply, she walked away quickly, afraid someone might see the kindness. It was the first spark of humanity I'd received that night, and it confirmed something crucial. I hadn't imagined any of it. I continued toward the back of the house. I knew Lorraine hovered around those areas. I knew she controlled those spaces. And I knew that if there was a secret somewhere, it would be hidden behind one of those doors. When I passed the second door, a narrow one, almost concealed next to the service staircase, I felt a cold draft. The door was slightly open. I froze, looked around. No one, no guests, no staff, nothing. It was as if that corner of the mansion had been suspended out of time. Then came that unmistakable shiver, the kind women who've been silenced for years recognize in their bones. The shiver that says, go. I pushed the door open with my fingertips. What I saw wasn't shocking, yet, but it was revealing. A storage room, files, boxes, old folders, photos, yellow documents. Things families keep when they want to manage their stories tightly. My first instinct was to step inside completely, but a new kind of fear, sharp, alert, kept my body frozen at the threshold. I inhaled deeply. I knew that if I stepped in, there would be no turning back. Not emotionally, not psychologically. And that's when I heard it, a sentence that sliced right through me. She can't see this. You promised you'd take care of it. The voice came from the hallway next to me. Two people. One was unmistakably Lorraine. The other, one of the uncles. I stood absolutely still, turned my head a fraction of an inch to listen. Desmond's nervous, the uncle said. He's losing control of the situation. He'll manage, Lorraine answered, cold and sure. My son knows where his loyalty lies. Maya needs to learn. Maya, me, learn. That word hit my chest like a hammer. And in that moment, I didn't feel rage, or sadness, or humiliation. I felt clarity. I wasn't part of the family. I was part of a plan. And when that truth entered me, brutal, raw, unapologetic, my fear vanished. There was only silence inside me, and within it, a certainty. I had to follow the truth to the end, even if it hurt, even if it shattered things, even if it changed everything. I took a step into the forbidden room, and that's when I heard footsteps behind me. Not hesitant, not accidental, firm, calculated, coming straight toward where I stood. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was, but I turned anyway. And when I saw the silhouette standing in the hallway, staring straight at me, I knew nothing about that night would ever be normal again. It was Desmond, and he had seen everything. When I turned and saw Desmond standing there in the hallway, my stomach dropped. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because for the first time that night, he didn't look like my husband. He looked like someone guarding a secret. Someone who was there not to protect me, but to stop me. His expression wasn't surprise. It was fear, but not fear for me, fear of me. He watched me like I was a threat, and that hit harder than anything else. Because until that moment, despite all the hurt, I still carried one illusion, that somewhere deep inside him, there was a small part that was still mine. A part that would choose me if it ever came down to it. A part that would stand up for me. But when I saw the way he looked at me, tense, rigid, like someone caught breaking rules, I realized even that last bit of hope was being ripped away. Maya, he said, taking a step forward. His voice was low, heavy, packed with something between panic and control. Only someone who has lived with a person for years can hear the words behind the words. And what I heard behind that Maya wasn't concern. It was, don't go any further. You shouldn't be here, he repeated, the same phrase he had whispered at the entrance earlier, but now waited with urgency. I didn't step back. Not anymore. I looked him straight in the eyes, feeling my breathing steady with a surprising kind of calm. It was as if the woman who always shrank had finally stepped aside for the one who understood her worth. "Why?" I asked. "What's in there that you don't want me to see?" He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could form a single word, Lorraine appeared behind him. It was like watching a perfectly rehearsed play. Lorraine gliding into the dim hallway, posture sharp, presence dominating the scene, as if her mere arrival decided the outcome. She didn't look at me first. She looked at him. Always him. Always making sure the chain of command ran through her, not me. "Desmond," she said softly, almost elegantly, "take your wife back to the party, now." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. And worse, an order addressed to him, as if I weren't even standing there. Something inside me simmered. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice lower than I expected. Not weak, but steady. The kind of steady that cuts more than shouting ever could. Lorraine finally turned her eyes toward me, and the look she gave me, that told the whole story. There was hatred, carefully wrapped in civility. There was certainty that she controlled the narrative. There was the quiet belief that I was someone who needed to know my place. But for the first time, there was something new in her eyes. Insecurity. "This hallway isn't for guests, Maya," she said, every word so polished it was nauseating. "You're misunderstanding things. We don't want you to feel out of place." I let out a small laugh. Dry. Humorless. "I'm not out of place, Lorraine. You work way too hard to make sure I am." Her mouth twitched. Barely, but it did. The first crack in the mask. Desmond stepped in then, his tone almost pleading. "Maya, please, you're upset. We can talk later." That sentence nearly pushed me out of myself. That was always the pattern. Whenever I got too close to the truth, he became the calm one, the man who tries to reduce everything to my emotions, as if my discomfort were an overreaction instead of a reaction to the reality they built. But tonight, I wasn't emotional. I was aware. "I'm not upset, Desmond," I whispered. "I'm seeing." He rubbed his face, tired, except I knew that gesture. It meant he realized the situation was slipping out of his hands. He glanced at his mother, searching for guidance. And then the first real shock of the night happened. Lorraine, thinking I wouldn't notice, grabbed his arm. A subtle squeeze, a silent command. And he lowered his head. My heart broke in the deepest way a heart can break. Not from discovery, but from recognition. He wasn't on my side. He had never been. He was always hers. And that was the moment the illusion truly died. As I absorbed at, Lorraine stepped forward, blocking the doorway and hiding part of the room behind her. "There are things in this house that don't concern you," she said, firm, pronouncing it like a decree. I took a breath, feeling courage gather in my throat. Every one of her words pushed my voice upward. "But they concern my husband, don't they?" I asked. "What you discuss behind my back, the decisions you make without me, the things you hide, even from him." The air thickened. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. And right there in that charged hallway, something happened that I never could have predicted. The second twist. The voice that came next wasn't Lorraine's or Desmond's. It was Clara's, my sister-in-law, standing behind her, pale, anxious, gripping her phone with trembling fingers. "Stop it, Mom," she whispered urgently. "Enough." Lorraine turned in shock. Clara continued. "She already figured it out. There's no point hiding anything now." Desmond went white. Lorraine's jaw clenched. And me? For the first time in that family, I felt the truth was about to leak. Not because I forced it, but because the entire structure was beginning to crack from within. I stepped forward, not to attack, to choose. "I'm going to find out," I said quietly, "with your help or without it." Then I walked backward, slowly, never looking away. Because in that moment, I wasn't the tolerated woman anymore. I was the woman they feared. When I stepped away from that hallway, my body was still shaking, but it wasn't the trembling of someone afraid of collapsing anymore. It was the trembling of someone finally realizing she'd spent far too long accepting a narrative that was never hers. The mansion looked different now. The furniture, once so imposing, seemed smaller. The lights, once so dazzling, felt harsh. The people, blurred. Because in that moment, I could only see one thing, the truth pounding in my chest. I walked slowly to the side veranda, not to escape, but to hear myself. I needed silence. I needed to feel what was rising inside me, something I hadn't recognized in years, clarity. The night breeze brushed my face like a soft slap, a reminder that I was still alive despite everything. I placed my hands on the cold railing and closed my eyes. And for the first time that night, maybe for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I thought. I thought about every time their behavior seemed merely odd, but now I understood as strategy. I thought about every moment Lorraine treated me like a visitor in a home that should have been mine too. I thought about Desmond's eyes, always torn between wife and mother, but always choosing the wrong side. I thought about the crooked frame, the missing photo, the whispers when I passed by, the way Lorraine gripped his arm, his obedience, quiet, automatic, and the phrase that slipped from him earlier on the veranda, something he tried to swallow too quickly. My mom was right. This became a problem. That sentence wouldn't leave me. It looped in my head like a warning. I was the problem. Me. Not their behavior. Not the emotional manipulation. Not the disrespect. Me. And that's the point where many women fall apart. But for me, that was the point where I woke up. As I breathed slowly, I sensed someone behind me, but it wasn't a threat. It was Naomi. She approached gently, the way someone does when they know even a single wrong word can break a person holding herself together. "Maya," she murmured softly, "you look different." I turned to her, and for the first time that night, I wasn't the humiliated woman. I was the woman who finally understood. "I'm seeing," I whispered. She frowned with concern. "And is that good or bad?" "It's everything," I replied. "It's what I've been missing." Naomi took my hand, a small gesture, yet grounding, because real friendship is presence, not speeches. "If you need to leave," she said, "I'll drive you." I shook my head. "Not tonight, not like this." And that was true. Walking out of that mansion would serve their narrative, the fragile wife, the woman who couldn't handle it, the outsider who didn't fit. No, I wouldn't run. I would stay. Not for them, but for me. To see, to understand, to record every detail of a night I knew would matter later. Naomi hugged me gently and stepped back, giving me space. And there, alone again, something began forming inside me, something I never thought I'd need to build. A quiet plan. It wasn't revenge. It was emotional justice. And emotional justice requires strategy. I started organizing my thoughts the way you organize drawers. They're afraid of something I might discover. Lorraine controls everything, even him. Clara knows more than she admits and is beginning to crack. Desmond is torn, but his loyalty has been conditioned to point to her. And I am no longer the woman they think they can manipulate. And as I realized all that, something lit up inside me, a measured kind of courage, not impulsive, but mature. I needed to protect myself and prepare myself. So I made the most important decision of the night. I wouldn't confront anyone emotionally again. Not with shouting, not with crying, not with scenes. I would confront with information, with truth, with intelligence. And for that, I needed to observe everything and keep everything. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check messages, but really taking mental notes. The forbidden hallway, the phrases I overheard, Clara's reaction, Lorraine's posture, Desmond's hesitation, the missing photo, the crooked frame. I didn't know how yet, but I knew all of it would matter. When I walked back into the mansion, I carried myself differently. My steps were the same, my face was the same, but my energy wasn't. The room was full as before, but now I saw everything with sharper eyes. That powerful, proud, elegant family suddenly seemed fragile, and I knew exactly why. They didn't know how much I had figured out. They didn't know what I had seen. They didn't know what I had begun to uncover. And fear has a way of leaking out. As I moved through the room, something surprising happened. A different silence followed me. Not the silence of disdain, the silence of caution, of alertness. And that, for the first time that night, was a small victory. Quiet, subtle, but real. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I felt my strength returning. But just as I steadied myself, just as I thought I had regained some internal control, I heard a sentence behind me that sliced the air. "She's moving around too much. We need to act." I froze. The voice belonged to a family member. And without meaning to, I had just overheard the beginning of something bigger. Something that would change the direction of the night entirely. "She's moving around too much. We need to act," slipped under my skin like a thin splinter, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore. I stopped in the middle of the room. Glasses clinked, soft laughter floated through the air. Music filled the space. But inside me, everything went silent, completely silent. There's a difference between freezing out of fear and freezing out of strategy. For the first time in years, I was experiencing the second. I turned slowly, searching for the source of the voice. It was one of Desmond's uncles, the type who always spoke to me with that stiff politeness that tried too hard to hide judgment. He stood by the entrance of the side hallway, speaking in low tones to someone else, Clara. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough to know it wasn't idle gossip. It was coordination, movement, containment. "She's heard too much. This complicates things," Clara whispered, her fingers tightening around her phone. "That's exactly why," the uncle replied. "Your mother's at her limit. If she goes into that room again, nothing will hold her back." My mouth went dry. They knew. They could feel I was piecing the truth together, and that terrified them. But what truly surprised me was what I saw when Clara raised her eyes and met mine. Not arrogance, not superiority, guilt. A guilt so heavy it warped her whole posture. She quickly looked away and stepped back from the uncle, like the mere act of meeting my eyes exposed her too much. And in that moment, I realized something I'd never expected. Clara wasn't as loyal to her mother as she pretended to be. She was split in half. And a split person can become a bridge. My heart sped up, not with panic, with calculation. I took a deep breath and walked to the center of the ballroom, making sure my steps were controlled, my expression neutral, my presence unmistakable. The only weapon I had that night was composure, and I was finally learning to use it. That was when the atmosphere changed. Conversations dipped when I passed. A few people avoided my gaze. Others, who had ignored me all evening, suddenly smiled too brightly, too late. The family was uneasy. For the first time, I wasn't their easy target. I was their variable. A few minutes later, I felt someone approach me, not stealthily, but with the heavy tread of someone carrying something urgent. Desmond. He looked exhausted, but not ordinary exhaustion. It was the tiredness of a man holding together a story too big and too fragile for too long. He ran a hand down his face, exhaling hard. "Maya," he said, stopping in front of me, "we need to talk." I looked at him with a calm that surprised even me. "Talk?" I said. "Or damage control?" He blinked, caught off guard. For the first time, he really heard me. "I know tonight's been tense," he began. "I know my mother crossed some lines. But you also—" "I also what?" I cut in, silently but sharply. "I also noticed things you tried to hide. I also stopped pretending everything was normal. I also stopped being convenient." His jaw tightened. Silence. And in that silence was the truth he didn't want to confess. I wasn't imagining anything, and he knew it. "I don't want to fight, Maya," he said softly. "I just want peace." Peace. A word used by men who really mean silence. I let my breath steady. "You don't want peace, Desmond. You want me quiet." His eyes widened because I had exposed him, not loudly, but precisely. Before he could respond, I noticed movement behind him. Lorraine, standing beside the grand piano, watching us. Not blinking, not moving, measuring, waiting. And that's when something unexpected happened. A woman I had never met before, a guest in her 60s, elegant silver hair, warm eyes, walked up to me. "Maya," she said gently, touching my arm, "I just love your necklace. You have wonderful taste." A simple compliment. Nothing unusual. But in that house, in that moment, it was a grenade. Recognition, validation, from someone they couldn't silence, control, or dismiss. Lorraine's expression cracked. Desmond stiffened. Clara flinched. A micro-victory. Small, precise, devastating. The woman walked away without realizing her role in the unfolding collapse. And that was when Desmond tried to regain control. "Let's go upstairs," he suggested. "Just the two of us. We can talk privately, without all this." It sounded gentle enough, but I knew that tactic well. Remove the woman from the room, control the narrative, contain the explosion. This time, my voice hardened, quietly. "I'm not going anywhere until I understand what you're hiding. All these whispers, these closed doors, you really think I don't notice?" His face paled. Lorraine's posture sharpened. Clara froze like a statue. I delivered the blow with clarity, not emotion. "If you want me to stop searching, show me the truth. Otherwise, I'll keep walking through this house like someone who belongs here, and like someone who's investigating." The room fell into a thick, touchable silence. Desmond lowered his head, not because of shame, but because he lost control. Then Lorraine stepped forward. For the first time since I'd met her, the mask slipped. "Maya," she said, trying to sound composed, "there are things you aren't meant to understand." "Then why are you so afraid I'll see them?" I asked. She opened her mouth, and no sound came out. And right then, from behind her, came a trembling voice. "Maya, I need to tell you something." Clara. Her face pale, her hands shaking, her eyes pleading. And I knew everything was about to break open. When I heard Clara say, "Maya, I need to tell you something," it was like someone slammed the brakes on the entire night. The music kept playing, guests kept chatting, glasses kept clinking, but all of it faded into background noise. I looked at her and saw something I had never seen before, a fracture. The sister who had always played the obedient daughter, always aligned with her mother, suddenly looked small, tired, weighted down by something heavy. "Come with me," she said quietly. without meeting my eyes, already walking toward a side hallway. For a second, I hesitated. I didn't trust anyone in that house. But the tremor in her voice wasn't fake. It wasn't polished or rehearsed like everything else that family did. It was human. So I followed her. She led me into a small office near the library, a tucked-away support room with a single armchair, a side table, and a lamp casting soft light. The sound of the party was muffled in there, like it belonged to another universe. Clara shut the door gently, took a deep breath, and for the first time since I met her, looked at me as an equal, not from above. "I can't keep watching this and stay quiet anymore," she began, running a shaky hand through her hair. "I'm not innocent, Maya. I got things wrong too, but you need to know." My heartbeat sped up, but my mind, or maybe my instincts, stayed calm. "Then talk," I said. "Stop treating me like I'm fragile." She swallowed hard and said, "Before the wedding, my mother tried to stop it." My chest tightened, but I didn't interrupt. "She said you weren't right for the family, that you didn't match the profile. She tried more than once to convince Desmond to break up with you." That hurt, but it didn't surprise me. The next part did. "And it wasn't just disapproval," Clara continued, voice trembling. "She pressured him. She made deals. She told Desmond that if he insisted on being with you, he'd have to accept that certain financial decisions would always stay under her control. The business, the properties, the investments, everything tied to her approval." I blanked, not understanding for a moment. "Tied how?" I asked. "She changed documents," Clara said, shame darkening her face. "Contracts, legal arrangements, always with the same excuse. 'I'm just protecting the family, my son. You're too emotional.' She painted you as a risk, not because you were dangerous, but because you couldn't be controlled." My whole body froze. It wasn't just hostility. It wasn't just dislike. It wasn't even about me personally. It was about control, power, assets. The mansion, the empire, the legacy. None of it was scenery. It was leverage. I stared at Clara. "And you knew this?" She closed her eyes. "I knew parts, not everything. I agreed to stay quiet. It was easier than confronting her. But tonight, seeing how she treats you, how she acts like you're some kind of inconvenience, I can't pretend anymore." A thick silence settled between us. This wasn't just emotional rejection. This was a strategy to keep me small, vulnerable, dependent, grateful for crumbs. And yet, despite my anger, I recognized something in Clara that I hadn't expected. The beginning of her own breakaway. "Why are you telling me now?" I asked softly. She took another deep breath. "Because tonight, you didn't bow your head," she whispered. "And I envied that. I haven't had the courage to stand up to her in years. Something in me cracked, not with pain, but with recognition. I, the outsider, the inconvenient one, had become someone she could look up to." "Let me tell you something too," I said, sitting on the edge of the table. "I'm not fighting to be accepted here anymore. That fight ended tonight. What I'm doing now is something else. I'm protecting myself. And if, in the process, the truth about what your mother has done comes out, that's her responsibility, not mine." Clara nodded, tears forming. "You're leaving him, aren't you?" she asked. "Not tonight," I answered. "Not in the middle of the spectacle. But emotionally, Clara, I'm already gone. And starting tomorrow, I'm reorganizing my life as someone who doesn't owe this family anything." Clara wiped a tear with her thumb. "I can share some documents with you," she said. "Not everything, but enough. Enough for you to know where to start. It's not courage yet, but maybe it's a first step." I studied her for a moment. Lorraine would never have predicted this. Her obsession with control was backfiring, creating cracks, not loyalty, creating witnesses, not soldiers. One day, I told Clara gently, "You'll have to choose yourself too." She lowered her gaze, not answering. But I knew the seed had been planted. When we stepped out of the room, something inside me had shifted for good. I was no longer the woman who felt out of place in the mansion. I was the woman who had just discovered the rules of the game, rules they never meant for me to see. And once you know the rules of a game, you have two options: stay a piece or become a player. That night, for the first time, I chose to play. I didn't make a scene, didn't confront Lorraine publicly, didn't scream at Desmond, didn't cry. I simply picked up my things, walked toward the exit with my head high, and before leaving, looked once more at that grand house, at the furniture, the pristine rugs, the old portraits. None of it intimidated me anymore. At the door, Naomi appeared. "You want me to drive you?" she asked. I looked at her with real gratitude. "Yes, but before you do, can you do something for me? Anything. Be a witness. Remember how they treated me, what was said, what wasn't. One day, if I need it, you'll be my living record." She squeezed my hand. "I already am." The consequences didn't come in a single blow. They came in waves. In the days that followed, Desmond tried to pretend everything was normal. He called, he texted, he tried to arrange calm conversations. And unlike before, I didn't pick up every call. When I finally answered, I didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't ask for explanations I already knew. I was clear. "I'm meeting with a lawyer," I told him, "not to hurt you, to protect myself. Did you know your mother structured your assets in a way that left me completely exposed?" Silence. Then, I didn't know everything," he admitted, "but I let it happen." "That's exactly what hurts," I said quietly. "You didn't have to raise a hand to hurt me. All you had to do was stay silent." He tried repairing everything, therapists, promises, resets. But deep down, that marriage had died in the hallway that night, the moment he bowed his head to his mother instead of extending his hand to me. I met with Jamal, the attorney, spoke with Evelyn, the neighbor, whose wisdom felt like a safety net, started building a life that wasn't a reaction, but a creation. And at night, a question kept echoing inside me. Now that I finally had the chance to free myself, what would I do with that freedom? I didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, I had the power to ask the right ones. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind that comes from the absence of noise, but the kind that comes from the absence of fear. It felt as if, overnight, my entire body had finally realized I no longer needed to walk on eggshells inside my own life. I opened my eyes slowly, stared at the simple ceiling of my home, and for the first time in a long time, I felt light. The mansion, with all its suffocating grandeur, was behind me now. Not just physically, but emotionally. It felt like I had peeled off a heavy, damp coat I'd been wearing without noticing. The air felt cleaner, my breathing deeper, my shoulders looser, my mind finally mine. I walked into the kitchen, turned on the light, and put water on to boil. The sound of the kettle, ordinary, unremarkable, hit me with unexpected force. It reminded me that I still had a life of my own, a life that didn't depend on surnames, inherited egos, invented traditions, or toxic hierarchies. As the steam rose, warming my hands around the mug, the question that had followed me into sleep resurfaced. What will I do with this freedom? I sat at the table, watching the steam swirl up like a soft spiral, and realized the answer wouldn't come like a lightning strike. It would come like everything else in my real life, slowly, steadily, consciously. But before any big decision, I needed to go through something essential: rediscovery. For years, I'd squeezed myself into roles I never chose. Roles like the tolerated wife, the inconvenient daughter-in-law, the woman who needs to fit in, the one who should be grateful. And in doing that, I'd abandoned versions of myself that deserved to survive. So I did something simple but meaningful. I picked up a notebook. Not to vent, not to bleed emotion onto the page, but to record decisions, not big dramatic decisions, foundational ones. I wrote, I will not return to that house asking for acceptance. I will no longer let them treat my silence as submission. I will not shrink my perceptions to fit anyone's narrative. I won't apologize for existing. I won't accept love conditioned, negotiated, or supervised. I won't walk into spaces that hope to watch me fall. And at the end, I choose myself. When I finished writing, I realized I was crying. But it wasn't grief. It was release. A soft, cleansing release. As if every tear rinsed off a layer of emotional grime they'd plastered on me over the years. My phone buzzed. A message from Desmond. Can we talk today? I need to explain. I love you. I don't want to lose you. I read each line slowly and felt nothing. Not rage, not longing, not heartbreak, nothing. Because when a woman finally awakens, the bond that once felt unbreakable becomes a worn thread, and the slightest tug snaps it. I replied, clear and composed, Desmond, I heard you that night. I heard your mother. I heard how you all talked about me as if I were an object. I'm not going to pretend nothing happened. I'm not going to shout or fight or expose anyone. But I'm also not going back to a place where I was diminished. I'm moving forward calmly with support and legal guidance. When I'm ready to talk, I'll let you know. I hit send, blocked his number, exhaled. This wasn't running from the conversation. It was protecting my heart, something no one in that family had ever done for me. A few hours later, Naomi showed up at my door with grocery bags and a smile only true friends know how to give. She walked in without asking permission, because real friends enter where they belong. Did you eat anything? She asked. I laughed lightly. I did, I swear. Liar, she said, going straight to the kitchen. Let's feed the future lawyer you're clearly becoming. We sat together and she watched me with a mix of worry and pride. You're stronger, she said. I saw it in that mansion, in your eyes. It was like watching a woman finally take off her own chains. I breathed slowly. I was so scared I wouldn't be able to do it. You'll always have fear, she replied gently. But now you have something you never had in that house, awareness. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. In the days that followed, I began reorganizing my life, not in chaos or revenge, but in quiet, focused steps. Documents, meetings with Jamal, advice from Evelyn, small adjustments at work, firm emotional boundaries. Nothing impulsive, everything intentional. And for the first time, the consequences of my strength didn't scare me. They freed me. That night in the mansion wasn't the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my return to myself. I didn't come back to play the victim. I came back to reclaim the leading role. And leading women choose their own path. So if you're listening to this and have spent years shrinking yourself to fit into a life that doesn't see you, if this story touched something inside you, if you recognized a version of yourself in these moments, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this with a friend who needs to hear it. And hear me clearly. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are awakening. And awakening hurts, yes, but it's the one pain that saves. If this story reached you, if it made your soul breathe a little deeper, if it reminded you of your own strength, leave a comment. Your voice matters, and I'm right here with you.